The night was quiet, yet shadows stretched unnaturally across the deserted research compound. The narrator spoke of how Project Ninex had once promised revolutionary discovery, but instead ended in silence. Dr. Evelyn Carter walked through the campus, her footsteps echoing against concrete walls that held secrets no one dared speak of. Evelyn Carter said, "Why would every scientist resign on the same day without explanation?" She pressed a folder closer to her chest, knowing its contents were fragments of classified notes left behind. The narrator described how whispers of cover-ups circulated, and fear had spread like an infection through those who once worked here. Evelyn Carter's determination shone as she approached the sealed laboratory, her breath visible in the cold air. The compound had been abandoned for months, yet faint hums still came from underground chambers. Evelyn Carter said, "If they all left, something forced them to." The narrator concluded the moment with silence falling heavier than the night sky, as if the building itself did not wish to be disturbed. The narrator described Evelyn Carter's hesitation as she circled the compound, each locked door a reminder of what was hidden. Evelyn Carter said, "Every scientist left this place, but none of them spoke about why." She pressed her palm against the steel and felt vibrations that shouldn't exist in silence. The narrator revealed how fear had rooted in those who once worked here, a fear strong enough to bind their tongues. Evelyn Carter said, "Whatever they saw here, it was worse than silence." She turned sharply when a breeze carried a faint voice, though no one was behind her. The compound seemed alive, resisting intrusion, as if warning her away. The narrator spoke of how Evelyn Carter's obsession began that night, her footsteps echoing through corridors that no longer belonged to human science. Evelyn Carter said, "If the truth is buried here, I must dig until I find it." She passed shattered glass panels where reflections seemed to move differently than her body. Her pulse quickened, but she pushed further. The narrator described how her shadow stretched unnaturally, warning of dangers unseen. Evelyn Carter whispered, "Something is still alive here." The narrator described Evelyn Carter as she discovered a file cabinet left ajar in the corner of a dark office. Dust covered everything, yet one folder gleamed as if recently touched. Evelyn Carter said, "Someone has been here long after the others left." She opened the folder, finding coded notes referencing Subject 0 and unethical directives. The narrator hinted that this discovery marked the first thread unraveling a tapestry of silence. Evelyn Carter said, "They didn't resign, they escaped." The narrator described how Evelyn Carter carried the file back into the main hall, her heart pounding as if the compound itself had awakened. Pages inside spoke of unknown anomalies and containment failures. Evelyn Carter said, "They found something here, something no one should see." A loud clang echoed from deep below, and she froze. The narrator noted how the air thickened, as though warning her of the path she had chosen. Evelyn Carter said, "Whatever happened to Project Ninex didn't end. It was buried alive." The narrator described how Dr. Evelyn Carter arrived at the old university archives, where Professor Malcolm Hayes once lectured about forbidden research. The grand hall smelled of dust and forgotten knowledge, every corner lit by fading lamps. Evelyn Carter said, "If anyone holds the truth about Project Ninex, it will be Malcolm Hayes." The narrator emphasized that Malcolm Hayes was respected yet feared, his silence as powerful as his intellect. Evelyn Carter pushed the heavy door open, her pulse racing with anticipation. Professor Malcolm Hayes looked up from a pile of manuscripts, his cold gaze piercing as if he already knew why she was there. Malcolm Hayes said, "You should have stayed away, Evelyn. Curiosity is a disease." Evelyn Carter replied, "Then I am already infected." The narrator spoke of the tension filling the room. two minds circling secrets buried deep in history. The narrator described Evelyn Carter stepping closer, her folder trembling slightly in her hands as she demanded clarity. Evelyn Carter said, "The scientists left in silence, but you knew their reasons." Professor Malcolm Hayes exhaled heavily, his eyes betraying both knowledge and regret. Malcolm Hayes said, "Truth is never free, Evelyn. They left because the truth was unbearable." The narrator revealed Evelyn's determination pushing against Malcolm's reluctance, an unstoppable force against an immovable wall. Evelyn Carter said, "Then I'll bear it, no matter the cost." Malcolm Hayes' lips curved faintly into a warning smile, his words dripping with menace. Malcolm Hayes said, "The cost is your sanity." The air grew heavier, as if unseen eyes observed them both. The narrator described how the conversation escalated when Evelyn Carter placed the mysterious file she had discovered onto the desk. Pages slid open, revealing notes about Subject Zero. Evelyn Carter said, "This was hidden in the compound." "What is Subject Zero?" Professor Malcolm Hayes' face tightened, his calm facade cracking at the name. Malcolm Hayes said that word was never meant to leave the walls of Project 9X. The narrator revealed that Evelyn's persistence unsettled him more than any government official ever could. Evelyn Carter said, "You cannot keep this buried forever." Malcolm Hayes clenched his fist, the weight of unspoken horrors pressing against his lips. Malcolm Hayes said, "Some truths burn everyone they touch." The narrator described how Evelyn Carter refused to leave without answers. She leaned forward, her voice shaking with intensity, her eyes never leaving Malcolm Hayes. Evelyn Carter said, "If the others were silenced, then you will not silence me." Professor Malcolm Hayes lowered his gaze to the pages, his silence heavier than his words. Finally, his voice broke the stillness. Malcolm Hayes said, "The scientists resigned because they witnessed what should never have been witnessed." The narrator revealed Evelyn's eyes widening, her mind already grasping the weight of those words. Evelyn Carter said, "You mean they saw something impossible?" Malcolm Hayes whispered, "Worse, they created it." The silence in the archive thickened, as if the walls themselves recoiled. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter left the archive shaken but resolute. The night outside was heavy with mist, and street lamps barely cut through the darkness. Evelyn Carter said, "If they created something unnatural, I need to know what it was." She walked briskly down the cobbled path, gripping the folder close to her chest. The narrator emphasized how Professor Malcolm Hayes' voice still echoed in her mind, his warning carved like stone. Malcolm Hayes had said, "Sanity cannot survive the truth." Evelyn Carter pressed forward, ignoring the fear that clawed at her thoughts. The narrator foreshadowed unseen watchers hidden in the shadows, ensuring she would not walk alone that night. The narrator described how Dr. Evelyn Carter walked into the dimly lit cafe where silence clung as heavily as smoke. She had been told to meet a woman who once worked on Project 9X. Sophia Grant waited at a corner table, her smile gentle yet guarded, her hands folded neatly over a notebook. Evelyn Carter said, "You were part of it, weren't you?" Sophia Grant leaned forward, her eyes shimmering with false warmth. Sophia Grant said, "I only wish to help you, Evelyn. The others will not speak, but I will." The narrator explained how Evelyn felt relief yet unease, her instincts whispering that truth was never freely offered. Sophia Grant's words flowed smoothly, too smoothly, like water hiding sharp stones beneath. Evelyn Carter said, "Then tell me why they left." The air between them thickened, each word a fragile bridge between trust and deceit. The narrator described how Sophia Grant lowered her voice, her tone carrying secrets wrapped in honey. Sophia Grant said, They saw things no one should ever see. They spoke of shadows moving in ways that defied reason. Evelyn Carter leaned closer, searching Sophia's expression for cracks. Evelyn Carter said, "You believe they ran out of fear?" Sophia Grant's fingers tapped lightly against her notebook, betraying a hidden tension. Sophia Grant said, "Fear was only the beginning. What they discovered could unmake everything we know." The narrator emphasized how Evelyn's heart raced, her need for answers colliding with the gnawing suspicion that Sophia revealed too little, too carefully. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter pressed Sophia Grant harder. Her voice steady though unease crept inside her. Evelyn Carter said, "What was Project Ninex truly hiding?" Sophia Grant paused, her smile fading only for an instant before returning, calculated and composed. Sophia Grant said, "Some answers can destroy the one who seeks them, Evelyn." The narrator noted how Evelyn's hand tightened around her folder, unwilling to let fear silence her. Evelyn Carter said, "I am not afraid of destruction. I am afraid of silence." Sophia Grant's gaze flickered, revealing a brief crack in her mask, but she quickly disguised it with feigned empathy. The narrator revealed that trust was a fragile fabric, and Sophia wove hers with threads too perfect. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter left the cafe with Sophia Grant, walking beside her through the misty street. The night was eerily silent, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. Evelyn Carter said, "If you truly wish to help, show me where they worked." Sophia Grant nodded with rehearsed hesitation, her voice soft. Sophia Grant said, "I can take you to a place they tried to erase." The narrator hinted at Sophia's hidden intent, for she guided Evelyn with a path carefully chosen, one that would mislead rather than reveal. Evelyn Carter said, "Then take me there now." The air grew colder, as if the city itself rejected their journey, shadows stretching longer behind them. The narrator described how Sophia Grant led Evelyn Carter to the edge of the old industrial district, where crumbling warehouses loomed like graves. Evelyn Carter said, "This is not the compound. What is this place?" Sophia Grant smiled faintly, her expression unreadable in the moonlight. Sophia Grant said, "This is where the truth first escaped." The narrator revealed Evelyn's growing suspicion, her instincts screaming that she was being led astray. Evelyn Carter said, "You're holding something back, Sophia." The air was heavy, as if even the wind knew deceit walked beside her. Sophia Grant turned her gaze away, her silence as sharp as any lie. The narrator foreshadowed betrayal brewing, masked behind fragile smiles. The narrator described how Dr. Evelyn Carter followed Sophia Grant into the derelict warehouse district, the air heavy with rust and silence. Inside a dim storage room, a figure emerged slowly from the shadows. Daniel Morgan stood frail yet composed, his eyes haunted by unspoken memories. Evelyn Carter said, "You worked with them, didn't you?" Daniel Morgan's voice cracked with weariness, each word dragging the weight of regret. Daniel Morgan said, "I lost everything because of Project Ninex. My family, my life, myself." The narrator revealed how Evelyn's determination met Daniel's brokenness. One seeking truth, the other shackled to tragedy. Sophia Grant stayed silent, her watchful gaze hiding intent, while Evelyn Carter's heart tightened, sensing Daniel's pain was bound to the mystery. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter gently pressed Daniel Morgan to speak, her voice low but insistent. Evelyn Carter said, "Why did they resign? What did you see?" Daniel Morgan's hands trembled as he stared at the floor, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Daniel Morgan said, "We built something that should never exist. It wasn't discovery. It was abomination." Sophia Grant shifted uneasily, her eyes darting to Evelyn, but she remained silent. The narrator revealed Evelyn's persistence breaking through Daniel's fear. Though his words arrived in fragments, each one carrying the sting of trauma. Evelyn Carter said, "The truth may hurt, but silence destroys." Daniel Morgan whispered, "The silence already destroyed me." The narrator described how Daniel Morgan finally opened the notebook he carried, its pages filled with coded sketches and desperate annotations. Evelyn Carter said, "These are experiments, aren't they?" Daniel Morgan shook his head, his voice cracking. Daniel Morgan said, "Not experiments, warnings." The narrator revealed Evelyn's breath quickening as she recognized references to Subject 0. Sophia Grant leaned forward with feigned interest, masking her satisfaction. Evelyn Carter said, "This proves it was real." Daniel Morgan closed the notebook quickly, his body stiff with fear. Daniel Morgan said, "Proof will not save you. Proof is why we all ran." The narrator described how Evelyn Carter pressed further, unwilling to let Daniel Morgan retreat into silence. Evelyn Carter said, "Tell me about Subject 0. What was it?" Daniel Morgan's voice faltered as he stared at her with hollow eyes. Daniel Morgan said, "It was not human anymore. It was something made of us, yet beyond us." The narrator revealed Evelyn's spine stiffening, her determination deepening even as fear whispered in her chest. Sophia Grant finally spoke, her tone dripping with calm deception. Sophia Grant said, "You see, Evelyn, this is the truth they buried." Evelyn Carter narrowed her eyes, sensing Sophia's satisfaction was not born of revelation but of control. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter and Daniel Morgan's fragile moment of truth shattered when a sudden noise echoed through the warehouse. Evelyn Carter said, "We are not alone." Daniel Morgan's face drained of what little color remained, his body shaking. Daniel Morgan said, "They never stopped watching. They never let us leave for real." Sophia Grant's expression hardened briefly before she masked it again with concern. The narrator emphasized how fear thickened the air, pressing against them like invisible hands. Evelyn Carter said, "Then the secret still breathes." The narrator revealed how this night bound Evelyn, Daniel, and Sophia into a web of danger that none of them could escape. The narrator described how Dr. Evelyn Carter left the warehouse with Daniel Morgan at her side, his steps unsteady as though the truth itself weighed him down. Sophia Grant walked slightly behind them, her eyes watchful yet unreadable. From the mist ahead, another figure emerged with deliberate calm. Dr. Nathan Cole stepped forward, his coat trailing against the wet pavement, his expression unreadable but purposeful. Evelyn Carter said, "Who are you?" Dr. Nathan Cole's voice was steady, his words cryptic. Nathan Cole said, "I am the one who tells you what others will not." The narrator explained that tension thickened as Daniel Morgan froze in recognition, his breath catching. Daniel Morgan whispered, "You were one of us." Nathan Cole's faint smile confirmed more than his words ever could. The narrator described how Nathan Cole's gaze pierced through the mist as though he had been waiting for this moment. Nathan Cole said, "You search for answers, Evelyn Carter, but the answers search for you as well." Evelyn Carter tightened her grip on the folder, her voice cutting through the tension. Evelyn Carter said, "Then tell me why Project Ninex ended in silence." Daniel Morgan muttered anxiously, trying to steady his voice. Daniel Morgan said, "He knows." He always knew. The narrator revealed how Sophia Grant leaned forward slightly, listening too carefully, her expression betraying hidden motives. Nathan Cole's voice carried weight, his words unsettling in their calmness. Nathan Cole said, "Because they touched something that was never meant for human hands." The narrator described how Evelyn Carter stepped forward, her voice steady though unease rippled beneath. Evelyn Carter said, "What did they touch, Nathan?" Nathan Cole's lips curved faintly, a smile both unsettling and knowing. Nathan Cole said, "They opened a door to a place that does not forgive trespass." The narrator explained how Daniel Morgan shook his head violently, his voice cracking. Daniel Morgan said, "No more, Nathan. She doesn't need to hear it." Sophia Grant's eyes glimmered with interest, her silence revealing her hunger for control. Evelyn Carter said, "I will hear it all. I must." Nathan Cole's voice dropped lower, his words almost like a warning prayer. Nathan Cole said, "The truth will break more than your body, Evelyn. It will break your soul." The narrator described how Nathan Cole drew closer, his voice steady yet heavy with cryptic weight. Nathan Cole said, "Subject Zero was never just an experiment. It was the reflection of our deepest errors." Evelyn Carter's voice trembled only slightly, her determination unyielding. Evelyn Carter said, "Then show me. Show me what they saw." Daniel Morgan's voice broke with desperation, his fear spilling into the cold night. Daniel Morgan said, "No, Evelyn, once seen, it cannot be forgotten." The narrator emphasized Sophia Grant's subtle satisfaction, her eyes gleaming as though this was the moment she had been waiting for. Nathan Cole leaned back into the mist, his voice fading into warning. Nathan Cole said, "The revelation is not far, but neither is the price." The narrator described how the encounter ended as suddenly as it began. Nathan Cole stepped back into the fog, his figure dissolving into the night. Evelyn Carter said, "He knows where the truth lies." Daniel Morgan sank to his knees, his voice weak and broken. Daniel Morgan said, "He only appears when the secret is ready to consume another." The narrator revealed how Sophia Grant placed a hand gently on Evelyn's shoulder, her touch calculated, her expression unreadable. Sophia Grant said, "We must follow him. He is the only way forward." Evelyn Carter looked into the mist where Nathan Cole had vanished, her resolve solidifying even as dread coursed through her veins. The night grew colder, heavy with a silence that promised suffering yet to come. The narrator described how Dr. Evelyn Carter led Daniel Morgan and Sophia Grant back to the outskirts of the city, where silence pressed heavy against the night. They entered an abandoned chapel, used once by scientists as a hidden meeting place. The air was damp with mildew, candles long extinguished, but still holding the scent of wax. Suddenly, footsteps echoed, and a familiar voice pierced Evelyn's resolve. Andrew Carter stepped forward, his presence both shocking and unbearable. Evelyn Carter said, "Andrew, why are you here?" Andrew Carter's eyes narrowed, filled with restrained anger. Andrew Carter said, "You should have stayed away, Evelyn. The truth is mine to protect." The narrator revealed how Evelyn's world shifted, betrayal cutting deeper than any secret. The narrator described how Andrew Carter's voice carried bitterness, sharpened by years of silence. Andrew Carter said, "You always thought you could carry the truth better than anyone. You never understood what it cost me." Evelyn Carter's eyes filled with restrained pain, her voice firm yet trembling. Evelyn Carter said, "You betrayed them, didn't you? You betrayed all of us." Daniel Morgan whispered, almost too softly to hear. Daniel Morgan said, "He was with us. He knew everything." The narrator emphasized how Sophia Grant's subtle smile flickered, as if betrayal was a currency she understood well. Andrew Carter raised his hand dismissively, his words cold. Andrew Carter said, "I chose survival. They chose fear." The chapel walls echoed with unspoken judgment. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter's chest tightened, torn between love and fury. Evelyn Carter said, "You chose silence over family, over truth, over me." Andrew Carter's jaw clenched as his voice rose. Andrew Carter said, "I chose to live." Do you think anyone leaves Project Ninex alive with secrets in their hands? The narrator revealed how Daniel Morgan's face collapsed with sorrow, his whisper trembling. Daniel Morgan said, "He helped them bury it. He helped them bury us." Evelyn Carter's hands shook, but she stood tall. Evelyn Carter said, "Then you are not my brother anymore. You are their guard." The weight of betrayal filled the air, sharper than any weapon. The narrator described how Andrew Carter's voice softened briefly, revealing the cracks in his resolve. Andrew Carter said, "You don't understand, Evelyn. They forced me to choose, and I chose to survive." Evelyn Carter said, "You survived by betraying everything we stood for." Sophia Grant moved closer, her voice deliberate and sharp. Sophia Grant said, "Perhaps betrayal is not weakness but strength." Daniel Morgan's eyes widened, his body trembling. Daniel Morgan said, "No. Betrayal is death dressed as loyalty." The narrator explained that Evelyn felt surrounded not only by enemies, but by the collapse of her family, trust unraveling like frayed rope. Shadows deepened around them, as if the building itself absorbed their despair. The narrator described how the confrontation ended with silence heavier than words. Evelyn Carter stood trembling, her folder clutched to her chest, her eyes locked on Andrew Carter. Evelyn Carter said, "You chose them over me, over all of us. When the truth comes, it will devour you first." Andrew Carter's expression hardened again, his final words striking like stone. Andrew Carter said, "Then may the truth devour us both." The narrator revealed how Daniel Morgan sank to a bench, broken by the collapse of trust, while Sophia Grant's satisfaction glimmered behind false concern. The night outside howled through shattered glass, sealing betrayal as a wound that would never close. The narrator described how Dr. Evelyn Carter, Daniel Morgan, Sophia Grant, and Andrew Carter entered the final chamber beneath the compound ruins, guided by whispers of truth and betrayal. The air was damp and metallic, the hum of unseen machinery vibrating through the stone. Evelyn Carter said, "This is where it began." Andrew Carter's voice was cold but cracked with guilt. Andrew Carter said, "And where it will end." Daniel Morgan's trembling voice filled the space. Daniel Morgan said, "We swore to bury her name, but it has never stopped haunting us." The narrator revealed that etched into the walls was the name Dr. Helena Morris, the scientist whose disappearance had fueled their silence. Evelyn Carter's chest tightened. Evelyn Carter said, "She was the victim. She was the key." The narrator described how Daniel Morgan fell to his knees, tears staining his face as memories overcame him. Daniel Morgan said, "Helena Morris was the first to resist. She tried to stop the project, but they silenced her." Evelyn Carter stepped closer to the center, her heart pounding with dread. Evelyn Carter said, "They didn't resign. They ran from the shadow of her death." Andrew Carter clenched his fists, his voice hard. Andrew Carter said, "She knew too much, and she was willing to expose it. That's why she vanished." The narrator revealed Sophia Grant's expression shifting with quiet satisfaction, her silence more dangerous than words. Evelyn Carter's hands shook as she whispered. Evelyn Carter said, "Helena Morris is the reason this entire place was abandoned." The narrator described how Evelyn Carter uncovered a locked steel crate near the wall. She forced it open, revealing Helena Morris' final journal, pages filled with warnings and desperate sketches of Subject Zero. Evelyn Carter said she documented everything. She left proof. Nathan Cole's voice echoed suddenly from the shadows as he stepped into the chamber. Nathan Cole said, "Her proof is why they resigned." No one could continue after reading what she left. The narrator revealed Daniel Morgan covering his face, unable to look at the evidence. Daniel Morgan said, "It wasn't discovery, it was damnation." Evelyn Carter held the journal tight, knowing it was both salvation and curse. The narrator described how Evelyn Carter demanded clarity, her voice sharp as a blade. Evelyn Carter said, "What was Subject Zero?" Nathan Cole's voice was heavy with finality. Nathan Cole said, "It was Helena Morris. They transformed her." Daniel Morgan sobbed uncontrollably, his voice breaking apart. Daniel Morgan said, "She volunteered to save us, but what returned was no longer human." Andrew Carter looked away, his guilt etched deep across his face. Andrew Carter said, "They told us it was science, but it was sacrifice." The narrator revealed Evelyn Carter's world shattering, the truth breaking every illusion she held. Evelyn Carter whispered, "They didn't resign. They escaped what Helena Morris became." The narrator described how the chamber grew darker, silence broken only by Evelyn Carter's trembling breath. She clutched Helena Morris' journal to her chest as shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Evelyn Carter said, "The truth will not stay buried any longer." Andrew Carter's eyes hardened as if preparing for inevitable ruin. Andrew Carter said, "Then you will carry it alone, Evelyn, and it will consume you." Daniel Morgan collapsed fully, whispering brokenly. Daniel Morgan said, "Helena Morris will never release us." Nathan Cole's voice echoed with grim certainty. Nathan Cole said, "Project 9X ended because no one survives its truth." The narrator revealed Evelyn Carter leaving the chamber, her figure framed in cold light, victorious in knowledge, yet forever scarred by the revelation.